In Preston County, West Virginia, a close-knit community nestled in rural Appalachia, life unfolded peacefully amid rolling hills and the winding Cheat River. This place sat right on the edge of the Mason-Dixon line, a picturesque land where beauty masked its quiet isolation. Here, everyone stood ready to lend a hand to their neighbors. But on one fateful day, that stillness shattered with the piercing ring of a 911 call, a harbinger of a nightmare about to unfold.
Preston County 911, what's the address of the emergency?
I'm actually driving. I just passed a car on Shower Bath Road that pulled over. They had smoke rolling out the window. It's a truck. It's a green truck.
Law enforcement sprang into action, and the first to arrive was Deputy Justin Childers. Before him loomed an old pickup truck, wisps of smoke still curling inside its cabin like a silent warning. As he drew closer, the sharp stench of oil hit him, revealing traces of a clumsy arson attempt. Someone had tried to set it ablaze, but the flames had fizzled out before they could take hold. His mind raced. This was no accident, it was a calculated act gone awry. Without hesitation, he summoned the fire department, commanding that the scene remain untouched, every clue preserved. Perry Barlow, the local fire chief, was among the first responders to step into the chaos. The truck stopped him cold. It looked exactly like the one belonging to his uncle, Philip Barlow. A registration check confirmed his dread. This was indeed Philip's truck, known to all as Buckie. Questions surged through Perry's mind like a tempest. Why was his uncle's truck stranded on Shower Bath Road, abandoned and scorched? Where was Buckie? What was happening? Perry knew his uncle worked at Hillside Trucking. He should have been behind the wheel of a big rig, not leaving his personal vehicle in ruins. To Perry, Buckie would never abandon his truck like this unless someone had stolen it. Unable to stand still, Perry dialed Hillside Trucking, only to be struck by a chilling revelation. Buckie had not shown up for work that day, a break from his impeccable punctuality. Worry morphed into a gnawing premonition. By now, the police and firefighters shared the same unease. Oil splattered across the back seat, the acrid smell hanging heavy in the air. This was no random mishap. Someone had deliberately tried to destroy the truck, though the fire had failed to fully ignite. Theories swirled. Had Buckie torched it for an insurance payout? Or had a thief sought to erase evidence? No one could say for certain, but the atmosphere thickened with urgency. Buckie had to be found, no matter the cost. Philip Buckie Barlow was born in 1957 into a large, tight-knit family in Preston County, the eighth of 9 siblings. His father toiled as a coal miner, his mother tended the home, and everyone pitched in on their small farm. Life was harsh but fulfilling, shaping Buckie into a resilient man. After dropping out of high school, he took up truck driving at 17, a trade that seemed to run in his veins. By 2002, his life took a new turn when he met Mary Butler at the Hideaway. They fell into each other's orbit through weekend dances, and for 20 years, Mary became his entire world. She joined him on camping trips and family birthday parties, and he seized every chance to be near her. But in 2011, Mary faced a tough choice and returned to her home state of Indiana, leaving a vast distance between them. Despite the separation, they vowed to keep their love alive. Buckie planned to retire in September 2019 and moved to be with her, counting down the days with uncontainable excitement. He dreamed of leaving the driver's seat behind, of spending his remaining years by Mary's side. Yet, less than 4 months before that long-awaited day, his truck turned up burned and abandoned by a Preston County roadside. Oil drenched the cabin, a blatant sign of sabotage. Investigators were certain this was no accident. But the question loomed large: who was behind it? And where was Buckie? Deputies rushed to check on Buckie's home in Tunnel, a mere 10 to 15-minute drive from the truck's location. They pounded on the door, called his name, but silence greeted them. No signs of a struggle appeared, leaving them without cause to break in. Buckie's family swiftly pointed investigators toward his girlfriend, Mary Butler, now living in Indiana. When a call came on May 29th, telling her Buckie had missed work and his truck was found torched, Mary's world collapsed. A torrent of questions flooded her mind. Where was he? What had happened? A dark instinct told her something was terribly wrong. Then, the search for Buckie's whereabouts plunged authorities into a horrifying crime. A blood-soaked scene emerged, a throat slashed, an esophagus and trachea severed, the hallmarks of a brutal murder. A web of potential suspects unfurled, tangled with grudges, hatred, and murky relationships, leaving investigators grasping for the true motive. Had a dispute spiraled out of control? Or had someone been dragged into a deadly abyss? Evidence hinted at a fierce clash involving multiple people, and the truth waited to be unearthed, cold, relentless, and unforgiving. In Preston County, West Virginia, a tranquil land cradled by rolling hills, the air turned heavy as authorities launched a desperate search for Philip Buckie Barlow, a 61-year-old man. His pickup truck, found 10 miles from his home, lay charred with unmistakable signs of deliberate arson. Smoke lingered in the cabin, oil stained the seats, a silent scream that this was no accident. Buckie had vanished, and a dark truth lurked somewhere amid the wilds of Appalachia. The first 3 days passed in a frenzy of searching. Investigators scoured every inch of the dense woods and winding trails around the burned truck, hunting for any trace of him. I strained for footprints, broken twigs, anything, but the forest held its secrets tight. Preston County, a small place where neighbors were like kin, always ready to lend a hand, now simmered with unspoken dread. Nearly 24 hours into the investigation, Mary Butler, Buckie's girlfriend, arrived in Preston County, her face etched with raw worry. She recalled their last contact, a brief call at midnight before he readied for work. Buckie, a man of unerring punctuality, typically left home between 12:15 and 12:45 to head to Hillside trucking. Mary had been at her mother's house when he called, promising to ring him back. 15 minutes later, her call went unanswered, swallowed by an eerie void. Sharing a phone account, she checked his last activity and found herself as his final connection. After that, Buckie slipped into the shadows. Investigators raced to ping his phone while Mary granted them access to his home. Inside, everything stood in perfect order, no chaos, no clues, as if he'd stepped out and never returned. They fanned out across his neighborhood, knocking on doors, pleading for any hint of what might have happened that night. But the neighbors offered only blank stares and shaken heads. No cameras captured that stretch of road, no witnesses emerged. The trail went cold. The phone ping yielded little. Its last signal flickered half a mile from his house, along the route he took to work, then vanished. A search for the device turned up nothing but frustration. The next day, the hunt intensified. Captain Tickle summoned National Guard planes to roar overhead, scanning the land, while K-9 units prowled below. Preston County's rugged terrain, steep hills, and tangled forests mocked their every step, a daunting foe in itself. Yet surrender was not an option. Buckie wasn't the type to vanish without a trace. Known for arriving early, his absence rang like an alarm no one could silence. 10 days of relentless searching dragged on, until a call to Preston County's 911 shattered the stalemate. A local hunter's voice crackled through, reporting a grim find at Fortney's Mill Creek, 20 minutes from Tunnelton, a desolate, lonely spot. As officers approached, the stench of decay hung in the air, stopping them in their tracks. There, face down in the shallow water, lay a body, moderately decomposed. Shirtless, jeans bunched at his ankles, it was a haunting sight. The medical examiner turned the corpse over, removed the dentures, and revealed the name Philip Barlow etched inside. Doubt evaporated. It was Buckie. His throat bore a savage wound, jugular slashed, artery torn, esophagus and trachea severed. He was nearly decapitated, a death so brutal it defied comprehension. Shock rippled through the scene. No one could fathom such an end for a man like Buckie. Mary collapsed in a storm of grief, unable to accept the reality. His family reeled, hearts torn apart by the loss of a beloved friend and uncle. Buckie hadn't deserved this fate. Answers became their desperate demand, and suspicion naturally fell on Mary, the closest person to him. She faced a polygraph test and passed without a flicker of doubt. Hours of interviews with Captain Ticknell uncovered no cracks in her story. Nothing tied her to the horror. She spoke of her love for Buckie, of a bond strong through years. But instead of remaining a suspect, she pointed investigators toward a new figure, Craig, Buckie's neighbor. She revealed a past clash, a heated argument turned physical, and her warning to Buckie to steer clear of him. That advice now echoed like a chilling omen. The investigation plunged into murkier depths, with Craig looming as a shadowy presence. Who had wielded the blade? What had driven this savagery? Bucky's body rested in the creek's cold embrace, a mute challenge daring the truth to surface no matter how merciless it might be. After the body of Philip Buckie Barlow was pulled from a remote creek in Preston County, West Virginia, the air grew thick with dread as police uncovered his tangled history with his neighbor Craig. A 61-year-old man, now just a cold corpse, had lived in constant friction with the man dwelling in the trailer behind his home. Craig's habit of cutting through Bucky's yard had sparked endless quarrels. On one fateful Sunday, Buckie set out to mow his lawn, only to find Craig's belongings strewn across it. A heated clash erupted, and Buckie, fuming, recounted the scuffle over the phone. Then, like a shadow swallowed by night, he vanished. Investigators pounced on this lead, tracking Craig to his dwelling just steps behind Bucky's house. He painted their feud as a petty dispute over property lines. Buckie had raged over trash bags left on his land. Tensions had boiled over, and in a flash of anger, Craig had dashed to his truck, snatching a golf club as a silent threat. He admitted the confrontation had happened a mere 7 days before Bucky's disappearance, but swore that on the night Buckie vanished, he'd been tinkering with a radio in a friend's Ranger truck, parked on a lonely back road, where he'd fallen asleep. When pressed on why he'd slept there instead of returning to his nearby home, he shrugged it off as routine. Yet something in his steady gaze hinted at secrets unspoken, a flicker of doubt igniting in the air. The trail didn't end there. Investigators sought out Chris, the truck's owner, to test Craig's story. Debbie, Chris's wife, met them at the residence and agreed to speak at the sheriff's office. Debbie accused that on the night Buckie disappeared, Craig had texted Chris with the message that if anyone asked about him, Chris should say that he had been with him the entire night. Chris, hauled in for questioning, denied any involvement. No messages, no contact with Craig, just a quiet night at home when Buckie disappeared. His phone backed him up, its records pinning it to his house without a trace of movement. But the smoothness of his account only deepened the unease, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot. The following day, Craig faced the interrogation room, strapped in as they challenged him over claims he'd begged Chris for an alibi. He sat unflinching, passing a polygraph test with ease. His phone, laid bare, revealed nothing. No evidence tied him to the mystery. Debbie's accusation of a text pleading for a cover story crumbled. No such message ever surfaced. A flood of rumors and lies swirled like a storm, choking the investigation's progress. With Craig and Chris cleared as suspects, the case staggered back to square one, hollow and stalled. Then, amid the gloom, a faint glimmer emerged. Captain Ticknell, his eyes sharp as steel, sifted through evidence once more and caught a snag, a small lie, subtle but piercing. Why had they hidden it? Suspicion flared, igniting a dramatic showdown between two new figures. A web of betrayal unraveled, dark and twisted, pitting them against each other in a clash of fury and deceit. One voice seethed with a threat, promising retribution, while the shadow of a woman, cold, manipulative, and brimming with malice, loomed large, chilling the air as the horrifying truth clawed its way toward the light. 8 months had elapsed since the brutal slaying of Buckie Barlow, and the authorities in Preston County, West Virginia, still fumbled through shadows, grasping for answers. His family dwelled in quiet dread, haunted by the specter of an unsolved mystery fading into oblivion. Yet a fierce conviction smoldered within them that no crime veiled in darkness could evade the light forever, that justice demanded a reckoning. In January of 2020, Detective Ticknell, with calloused hands and a razor-sharp mind, dove back into the case files like a warrior refusing defeat. He had painstakingly cleared suspect after suspect, but surrender was not in his nature. His scrutiny landed on faded statements from Laura Martin and Robert Quinn, 2 names once dismissed as footnotes. Neighbors living mere steps from Bucky's home, they had been questioned to sketch the lay of the land, their words stirring no suspicion then. Now, Ticknell replayed their voices, and a subtle fracture pierced the silence. Robert had offhandedly claimed an air conditioner had smothered all sound that night, while Laura mirrored the excuse, though her tone lacked the same ease. A memory too precise for something so mundane, it gnawed at him, a quiet alarm urging him onward. Ticknell followed the scent, discovering Laura and Robert locked away in Garrett County Jail for a spree of storage unit break-ins. He strode into the prison's frigid halls, the dim light casting long shadows as he faced them once more. This time, Laura shifted her tail. The hum of a washer and dryer, not an air conditioner, had cloaked the night's events. Robert held fast to his original story, his voice flat like a rehearsed line. The small but jagged inconsistency struck Ticknell hard. He sensed a doorway to something sinister. To dismantle their lies, he turned to Janice Maxwell, a neighbor near their home. His first question sliced through the stillness: did Laura's house have a window air conditioner? Janice's blunt refusal tore their cover apart. A trivial falsehood, yet its weight anchored Ticknell's certainty. Laura and Robert were hiding the truth about that fateful night. The investigation swelled like a gathering storm. Cheyenne, Laura's daughter, recounted a mother tethered to Preston County her entire life, brimming with joy at 19 when pregnant, yet tumbling into crime by 2002 burglaries, grand thefts, and defiance against the law. Laura parted from her children's father when they were small, then plunged into fleeting affairs with rough men. In October 2018, she crossed paths with Robert Quinn through an old lover, and passion ignited like an untamed blaze. Born in 1977, the youngest of 9 in New Martinsville, Robert had forsaken school for railroad work, securing a steady income before settling into Laura's trailer beside Bucky's place. Their bond with him was thin, brief hellos at best, but his irritation over their stray dog sparked petty clashes. Cheyenne couldn't place her mother or Robert on the night Bucky vanished, yet she clung to the belief that her mother lacked the savagery for such a deed, despite her fiery nature. Ticknell, unshaken, pressed deeper. He demanded every jail call from Laura and Robert at Garrett County. Robert's were scarce, but Laura's poured forth crude exchanges with an ex-lover, Mark, tolling like a death knell. With no physical evidence, no digital footprints, no forensic threads, the case teetered on a precipice. On October 7, 2020, Ticknell, flanked by Deputy Pye and the assistant prosecuting attorney, marched into Garrett County Jail, resolved to rip through the silence. They confronted Robert, wielding Laura's betrayal as a honed blade. A short recording 90 seconds to 2 minutes of her filthiest words to Mark blared in the stifling room.
You know what I need? You for about 20 minutes. You know I'm taking it one more time, right? Better be thinking when I get out. Alright, I love you, baby.
She's not faithful to you. You just heard it.
Robert froze, his eyes darkening as the truth seeped in. His resolve cracked, and he conceded Laura might not have been home all night. A chasm opened between them, widening with each breath. Then, in a breathless instant, he let slip that Laura had confessed to murdering Buckie Barlow. The secret burst forth like a tidal wave, dragging a terrifying darkness into view, ready to engulf them all. More than 1 year after the murder of 61-year-old Buckie Barlow, the shadows still clung to Preston County, West Virginia. Investigators pressed on, interrogating his neighbor Robert Quinn, who pointed the finger at his girlfriend, Laura Martin, as the architect of the crime. The room grew thick with tension as Robert, visibly shaken, insisted he could no longer hide the truth. He revealed that Laura had hatched a plan to rob Buckie, convinced he carried thousands of dollars in his pocket as retirement loomed. Why they believed he'd keep such wealth on him remained a mystery, but that delusion had unlocked a gateway to hell. The scheme unraveled in chaos. Robert recounted how Laura had gone alone to Buckie's house, lurking in wait for his return from work. As Buckie stepped onto his porch, she struck, intent on robbery, but he fought back with fierce resolve. A brutal struggle erupted. Laura landed blows, and the night echoed with violence. Robert emerged only when the clash intensified beyond control, unable to stand idle any longer. Together, they overpowered Buckie, forcing him into a vehicle. Robert held him in the back seat, his grip unrelenting, while Laura flung Buckie's phone out the window on the road to Fortney's Mill, a cold, calculated move to sever his last lifeline. Beneath the bridge at Fortney's Mill, Buckie's fate was sealed. Robert described how they dragged him there, and Laura ordered him to kneel. She stepped behind him, seized his hair, and plunged a blade into his throat, slashing sideways in a lethal arc. Buckie remained on his knees for 2 or 3 minutes, blood pooling, before collapsing. Laura shoved him into the water, her actions devoid of remorse, as if erasing a stain. Yet their haul was a mere $50, a pitiful sum for a man's life. Robert protested its worthlessness, only to be silenced by Laura's chilling threat, "Speak again, and he'd be next." The truck rolled back to Kingwood, where Laura tried to torch it, erasing their tracks in flames. Armed with Robert's account, investigators turned to Laura. Her face darkened when she learned he had betrayed her, and she offered her own version of the nightmare. She admitted the burglary was her brainchild, but swore murder was never the goal. Her heart couldn't bear such cruelty. She recalled the night of May 29th, when they donned masks and gloves, wielding BB guns that mimicked the real thing, stalking outside Bucky's door. But the plan shattered as Robert unleashed violence on him. A desperate melee engulfed all three. Laura took hits too, blood streaking her skin, yet she harbored no anger toward Bucky's self-defense. She pleaded with Robert to stop, but he barked at her to get in the truck. They sped to the creek, and there, Robert drew a box cutter. Laura's shock turned to horror as the blade sliced Bucky's throat. She shoved Robert aside, pressing her hands to Bucky's neck to stem the flow, tears streaming as she begged him to relent, but her cries fell on deaf ears. She cast herself as an unwilling savior, while Robert's threat to end her life too gleamed in his eyes, a feral, terrifying glint she'd never witnessed before. Their clashing confessions plunged the investigators into a mire of doubt. Each accused the other, yet the truth remained elusive. One person alone couldn't have wrought such carnage. Beneath a dim light, the question lingered, heavy and unresolved: who held the blade, and who wove the lies? More than 1 year after the gruesome death of Buckie Barlow, justice began to pierce the gloom over Preston County, West Virginia. Detectives had wrung confessions from Laura Martin and Robert Quinn, neighbors who lived mere feet from his door, once unseen threats now unmasked as monsters. In October of 2020, they were extradited from Maryland to West Virginia, shackled with charges of first-degree murder. The air grew heavy with revelation and anguish. Robert's role surprised few, but Laura's struck like a blade through the hearts of Bucky's stunned family. Travis Ticknell, the dogged detective, had vowed to unearth the killers, and he delivered on that solemn promise. Yet as the trial loomed, a call jolted the case anew. Several inmates who had shared a cell block with Laura at Garrett County Jail came forward, their words dripping with horror. Laura had bragged to them of murdering Buckie, reveling in the sensation of his blood spilling over her hands, yearning to relive that twisted thrill. She boasted further after the killing, she and Robert had taken Bucky's packed lunch, devouring his sandwiches with hands still wet with his blood. The tale was a chilling nightmare, her glee a haunting echo of pure evil that seared itself into memory. Laura emerged as the mastermind, a manipulative, cold, and malevolent force, dominating Robert in their warped bond. Yet even with 3 jailhouse witnesses backing the story, prosecutors harbored doubts. The pair's mutual accusations over who dealt the fatal slash wove a tangled web, risking confusion among jurors. A single wavering mind could unravel everything, deadlocking the verdict. In the end, a plea deal was laid before Laura and Robert, and they seized it, cornered like beasts with no escape. On October 5, 2022, Judge Schaefer brought down the hammer of justice: 180 years for first-degree armed robbery, plus 15 years to life for first-degree murder, the sentences stacked one after the other. Prison became their eternal tomb, a void without daylight or freedom. Bucky's family wept in relief, hands trembling as they thanked the judge. The neighborhood exhaled, safer now, yet scarred by the incomprehensible. A quiet small town shattered by a petty $50 robbery. Someone whispered they'd have paid $1,000 to spare him, but Laura and Robert's brutality had snuffed out that chance. Laura, shaped by a harsh upbringing and warped psyche, was no victim. Her menace lingered, a threat poised to strike again if unbound. Her punishment fit the crime, unyielding and just. Buckie, remembered for his gentle spirit and deep love for family, had touched countless lives. He was a cherished companion, a beloved soul, now a beautiful memory forever lost, leaving an unfillable void in the hearts of those who mourned him.